Unpopular opinion. Fringe countercultures are necessary for social progress. Fringe countercultures are necessary for social progress. This is from, difficult name. To Quinn with two N's. To Quinfinity on Reddit. Unpopular opinion user 2QINN Finity. Fringe countercultures are necessary for social progress. The explanation. I'm not saying they're right. I'm not saying we should all devolve to extremism. I'm saying that fringe countercultures have always been necessary to stirring the pot of social discourse. Do I think ruining expensive things and gluing yourself to them is the most effective strategy to combating climate change? No. But it raises an interesting point. You won't get there by voting your way out of it because, let's face it, most of us are happy to be blissfully ignorant consumers, and the onus is on corporate producers to make the moral decision to make less money for the greater good. I doubt that is likely. I think with all fringe beliefs, though they are rife with logical fallacies, have core tenets that have some purchase with a truth that centrist society is uncomfortable with. That is our opinion. I'll read it one more time, more naturally, maybe a little bit faster. Again, you can change the speed on your listening device, right? If it's a phone or whatever, you can change the speed to your comfort to be faster or slower. But this next reading, I'm just going to go through it as naturally as I can. So, fringe countercultures are necessary for social progress. I'm not saying they're right. I'm not saying we should all devolve to extremism. I'm saying that fringe countercultures have always been necessary to stirring the pot of social discourse. Do I think ruining expensive things and gluing yourself to them is the most effective strategy to combating climate change? No. But it raises an interesting point. You won't get there by voting your way out of it because, let's face it, most of us are happy to be blissfully ignorant consumers, and the onus is on corporate producers to make the moral decision to make less money for the greater good. I doubt that is likely. I think with all fringe beliefs, though they are rife with logical fallacies, have core tenets that have some purchase with a truth that centrist society is uncomfortable with. So that's the opinion. Before we do anything else, let's talk about the English. Fringe, Fringe. Fringe, like marginal, not normal. Fringe ideas would be ideas that are not the majority opinion, perhaps. Or an example, in university, I studied the criminologic aspect or criminogenic factors of fringe banks, right? Pawn shops, payday lenders, right? These are not normal banks. These are places where a pawn shop is a place. There's a famous show now too, but I guess it's old now. But a pawn shop is technically a bank where you go and give them some item, and they give you cash, and you have to pay back the cash that you get with interest. If you don't pay it back, they keep your item, like a gold ring or something. A payday lender is also a type of bank in the United States. I think it's illegal in Europe. I have no idea in Brazil. Never seen one in Brazil. But in the U.S., there are banks that will give you a paycheck, or excuse me, they'll give you cash if you have a future paycheck coming, right? If you need cash now, you can show them your income or your monthly salary or whatever, and they'll give you cash. The interest on the juros are like 900%. So it's a horribly corrupt style of banking. But so fringe, meaning not normal, on the outside, marginal, marginal. Countercultures, right? Pronunciation, spoken English. Counter cultures. We don't say counter, counter. And again, this could be my American, Californian dialect of English, but the NT in English, usually we don't pronounce the T. Counter. Um, Cultures are necessary. Okay. I'm not saying we should all devolve. I believe this is the same in Portuguese, devolver. No, maybe not actually. Not to return. Yeah, well, yeah, to return, or to the opposite of evolve, where you are not progressing, you are going backwards in direction of progress. So you're digressing. Um, Stirring the pot. I'm saying that fringe countercultures have always been necessary to stirring the pot of social discourse. Uh, to stir, again, the letters here for stir, the infinitive, STIR. It's two R's here. And I believe it should be necessary to stir the pot, not to stirring. I do not believe that there should be a to plus a gerundo, right? It should be to with an ing, but or with no ing, with the base form, to stir the pot of social discourse. So, what does this expression mean, to stir the pot? Typically, to stir the pot is to like cause trouble. We have a word, right? Dissent. So I'm saying that fringe countercultures have always been necessary to cause dissent or trouble of social discourse. Yeah, I don't think this person really used, at least grammatically, didn't use this expression correctly. I understand what they're trying to say, that fringe or marginal or cultural movements have been necessary to cause dissent and to bring up or promote ideas and thoughts and values that society might not be taking seriously. But to stir the pot usually is to cause dissent, to cause some kind of trouble. Do I think ruining expensive things and gluing yourself to them? This has been common. It's 2022 when I'm recording this. I've seen in the last 2 months videos of people gluing their hands to the street, or there was one in a car dealership, right? A place where they sell fancy cars. People gluing themselves to the floor. I forget the word in Portuguese, but think of it's not fita, it's not tape. It's that permanent liquid that you put on something and it sticks. I can't remember the name. Fucking Portuguese. But to glue yourself to something, in this case, it's literal. That we use this, right? My parents would say, you've been glued to the TV for 3 hours. Go do something else. Meaning, you have been stuck watching TV, not moving. Go do something else. So in this version, though, it is literal. There are people gluing themselves to places as part of protests for anti-oil and hey, climate change is real. We got to do something. Is kind of that's the message that they are promoting, whether or not it's effective. You won't get there by voting your way out of it. Let's face it. Vamos. Is it enfrentar? Enfrentar, confrontar, right? Let's confront it. Let's face it. Let's face it. To confront something. Usually, right, something difficult or something not easy. Most of us are happy To be blissfully ignorant, blissfully, happily, happily, bliss, happiness, um, synonyms, right? To be blissfully ignorant is to be happily ignorant or ignorante. The onus, I think this is the same in Portuguese, onus or onus. I don't remember where's the inflection, but the responsibility is on corporate producers. Um, the last paragraph, I think, with all fringe or marginal or minority beliefs, they are rife with logical fallacies. Rife meaning it's frequente, it's widespread, it's common. Full, or though they are full with logical fallacies or problems or incorrections, they have core tenets or principles that have some purchase with a truth that centrist society's uncomfortable with. That's it for the English on this episode, on this post. Again, from To Quinfinity, Quinn with Quinn. So, again, the question, or I guess the opinion, fringe countercultures are necessary for social progress. Yeah, I completely agree with this. Not necessarily the explanation, all of it, but just generally speaking, and we'll just look at the U.S., right? Hippie movement, sexual revolution, anti-nuclear movement, civil rights movement, anti-racism movement. Even being anti-racist at one point was an extremely fringe belief or fringe culture. Um, Women voting, right? This is all civil rights. People believing that women should have the right to vote and be civically involved or equal to men. Even that was a fringe belief. Free speech, same thing. That used to be a fringe belief. The right to own property, that used to be a fringe belief. LGBT, marriage and equality, again, civically, that's still a fringe belief. Maybe not fringe anymore. I think that is the majority, even if there's not equality in all places on that. I'm speaking about American society now. I believe that it's not a fringe opinion or marginal opinion that LGBT people should be on paper equal and treated equally, although the law doesn't reflect that in the U.S. yet. Anything else? I mean, anti-war movements are usually fringe in American history. Indigenous rights is typically a fringe or marginal movement. And yeah, the methods and the tactics of these movements are not necessarily always effective or not the preference. But all right, let's go to terrorism. Terrorism is a fringe movement in places. That would be extremism, but the movements that are fringe in a society typically are resorting or using extremism to kind of grab attention. So that is the source of the extremism. Not that it's justified, but and I think in American society, American history, yeah, absolutely, fringe countercultures have been necessary for progress. Meaning, without them, there wouldn't be women voting. There wouldn't be people, with equal rights. We can see now that even the fringe of the counterculture, right? The kind of reaction to civil rights movements in the U.S. is gaining some, or not dying, right? The people who were angry and upset about civil rights and anti-racism and, people who are anti-LGBTQ. I think they are the minority now. I don't think they're the fringe because their ideas are have typically historically been the majority in American culture. But there's a reaction, but progress has been made because there have been fringe countercultures, even though inside of a fringe counterculture, you could very easily go, "Oh, look at some of these wackos. Look at some of the tactics. Oh my goodness, this is unacceptable." Absolutely, but that's kind of the point, to move society in a direction that is just better or kinder to more people, or the environment, right? And that's kind of the visual now, on a lot of the posts I've seen or images and websites or articles, excuse me, that it's the environmental, um, the environmental reality that is making some people use some tactics that are getting on the news. But again, the reasons for their tactics are valid. They're completely valid. So, what do you think in Brazilian history? What are some fringe countercultures? I imagine some of them are similar to American countercultures, but not exactly the same, right? In the U.S., cannabis was a counterculture for a long time. In Brazil, maybe even still, right? Cannabis in California and the U.S. now is no longer a counterculture. So, what are your thoughts on the opinion? Um, this is tough. Is this an unpopular opinion? I think maybe not. I think people would agree generally that, yeah, you need some progress, and it doesn't come from the top down. It comes from somewhere in the bottom, usually a small corner or location or place or counterculture, right? That's the name, contracultura. So tell me about the Brazilian experience with countercultures and progress.